last speaker of this session is Mr. Rajesh Bista, who is a PhD candidate in the Department of Geography at the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill. So the title of his talk today is Human-Wildlife Interaction in the Middle Hills of Nepal, Feedback Effects of Community Forestry to the Social System. Rajesh, please.
Okay, so thank you, Dr. Song and Carolina Asia Center for this opportunity. Good morning again. Today, I'm going to present my ongoing PhD research, which has been recently published in Human Dimension of Wildlife. And I have entitled my presentation as Human-Wildlife Interaction in Mid-Hill Regions of Nepal, Feedback Effect of Community Forestry to the Social Systems. Brief background, as we all know that natural and human systems are integrated at multiple scales, forming a complex dynamic systems, and understanding such dynamic connections between ecological or social systems is critical for designing effective and sustainable conservation policies. And environmental conservation not only brings human well-being or multiple goods and services all the time, but it also comes with some kind of unintended effects on human community in some cases. So it is very important to understand the feedback between conservations and ecological dynamics. So though we already heard a little bit about the community forestry this morning, a quick recap. The community forestry in Nepal is one of the major forest governance mechanism in Nepal. It is the participatory and decentralized forest management approach. And so far in Nepal, we have around 22,000 community forest user groups managing 2.5 million hectares by 3 million households. And due to the continuous conservation efforts made by the community, the forestry area in Nepal has been increased significantly in the last 2 decades. And we based on the government data as well, we can see that the forestry area in Nepal has been increased from 37% to 45% in recent years. And most of these community forestry patches are in mid-hills are intertwined or interconnected with agricultural land, creating different forms of positive and negative interaction to the community. Simple hypothesis I put forward is increase in forest area in mid-hills regions of Nepal, increase the interaction between wildlife and human or with the social systems. And this is the one of the pictures from my field work that shows how the community forestry, agriculture, community landscape looks like. And most of the forests are close to the community and the agricultural land. And this proximity not only contribute to the livelihoods and human well-being, but also bring some kind of unintended cost, mostly mediated through different form of human-wildlife conflict, or in some cases, effect of forest to nearby agricultural land from this setting, or maybe competition for waters between forest and agricultural land, etc. So these are some of the representative newspaper clips that cover the issue of human-wildlife conflict in community forestry landscape. And surprisingly, there is very few scientific studies on it, despite the increasing incidence of human-wildlife conflict in recent years. Most of the studies on the issue in Nepal or in human-wildlife conflict in Nepal is only focused on protected areas, though the community forestry performed a subsidiary and substitution functions of protected area by serving the habitat for wild animals. And the recent newspaper also reported that 90% of the districts in Nepal have incidents of human-wildlife conflicts. And in fact, the conflict issue has been one of the major conservation issues, and it's been increasing every year in community forestry landscape as well. So with this background, I set three major objectives. The first one is to assess the economic loss incurred due to the crop raiding and livestock depredation. The second one is to determine biophysical and social negative factors contributing crop raiding and livestock depredations. And third one is to review the policy and mitigation measures to adapted to address the increasing conflict issue in community forestry. So we did our study in two major districts of Nepal, both experiencing significant human wildlife conflicts in recent years. And we covered 15 community forestry user groups. Both of the study sites have forest area more than 55%. And the study sites represent subtropical and temperate vegetation types. And the map on the top of the slides shows the distributions of land parcel coordinates collected and the distributions of GPS coordinates collected from our study sites to get the biophysical parameter for the modeling purpose. And this is the anti-VI trend for both of our study sites. And this trend also implied the improvement of forest conditions and expansion of vegetation area in study sites, which we also verified from our field surveys and other secondary sources. So we did our questionnaire survey in 415 households and collected 1,264 GPS coordinates for the land parcel. And we use geospatial tools to derive the multiple biophysical parameters such as distance to forest, or distance from house to forest, slope, elevations, or number of neighboring households, etc., to model human wildlife conflicts. And the economic cost was estimated by quantifying the crops damage and multiplying with that with the market price. And we developed 20 separate logistic regression models for crop raiding and 26 logistic regression model for livestock depredation, and use AIC methods to select the parsimonious model from the set of the models. So based on the theories and other empirical studies and field experience, we consider 14 potential predictors to model factors contributing crop ratings, and 9 potential predictors to model factors contributing livestock depredations. And these variables are measured at households and parcel levels. And these are the list of the variables with expected relations with outcome variables, which is binary for both crop raiding and livestock depredation. That is the land parcel with or without crop raiding in last 1 year, and households with and without livestock depredations in last 1 year. So coming to the results, we found that more than 72% of the households and 47% of the cropland parcel experience some sort of crop raiding incidents. And from our field survey also, we found that 93% of the respondents agreed increase in wild animal sightings, and the crop raiding incidents is mostly due to the effect of the community forestry. The monkeys, wild boars, porcupines, deer, wild rabbits, deers are major problem-causing animals in our study sites. And in total, the community lost around $10,000 per year from the crop raiding. And at the household level, it was around $24 per year. And this cost does not account the transaction cost and opportunity cost associated with crop guarding and protection, which I think would be more than we estimated. Similarly, we found 29% of the households experience livestock depredations, mostly caused by common leopards, Bengal fox, wildcats, or martins, and the community lose around $4,800 in a year. And on average, the affected household lost $38 per year from the livestock depredations. And we found the total cost of human wildlife conflicts was significantly different among the community forest user groups and caste groups. And the Dalit caste groups or marginal caste group lost 23% of their total agricultural incomes, whereas the Brahmin or Kshatriya caste group lost 17% and Janjati lost 21% of their total agricultural income. And out of 20 models we developed, our parsimonious model shows that increase in distance between the house and the nearby forest edge and number of neighboring households within a 50-meter radius decrease the odds of livestock depredations by 5% and 4%, whereas increased in elevations of households, locations, and livestock unit increase the odds of livestock depredations by 8% and 18% respectively. And from this, what we can speculate that the continuous trend of ongoing rural depopulations or outmigrations will impact the remaining households, mostly from the livestock depredations. Similarly, we found that increase in distance between land parcel and forest edge, walking distance from house to land parcel, and elevations of parcels decrease the odds of crop reading, and land type and cropping patterns are also the major factors associated with crop reading in our study sites. And another major social implications we found is the role of crop reading in cropland abandonment. So around 27% out of 1,264 land parcel in our study sites were abandoned. And out of the abandoned land parcel, 19% are only because of crop reading incidents. And higher number of cropland abandonment or agricultural incidents will have impacts on nutritional intake and food security in rural communities. And it might also add the additional economic burden to the rural communities. So like several studies, we found that the crop damage by wild animals is more likely to occur within the 200 meters from the forest edge. So we also found the higher proportion of crop reading with decreasing distance from the forest edge to the cropland. And in future, when the abundant cropland gets converted into the forest area as a result of passive successions, it might increase the likelihood of crop reading on the adjacent cropland. So talking about the policy, we found that policy initiatives and the compensation mechanism in place are primarily devised for protected areas, and those are not adequate to address the issue of wildlife in community forestry landscape. And from our interview also, we found the communities are unaware about the compensation schemes, and some of them who are aware, they are not benefited due to the rigorous compensation process and bureaucratic hurdles. And the community also lacked both technical capacities and legal authorities to manage wildlife in their community forest. And also the wildlife related provision in community forestry are still guided by National Park and Wildlife Conservation Act 1997. And some of the recent policy document or strategies also fail to address this issue, as they are only focused on addressing conflict issue in protected areas. And there is also the unclear jurisdictions between the government organizations or department regarding the management of wildlife in community forestry. So with this, we conclude that the crop raiding and livestock depredations are emerging as one of the conservation issues in community forestry, and that could offset the benefit that community are getting or the local people are getting if not addressed properly. And from our finding also, we found that poor and marginalized people are severely affected by the economic loss, and the existing mitigation measures and policies to address the conflicts are not adequate. And these issues should be addressed in both policy and operational level by considering different sort of biophysical and socioeconomic factors that are contributing to the human wildlife conflicts in the community forestry landscape. So with this, I would like to end my presentations, and the additional details about this study and findings are also present in recently published papers. So I'll be happy to take any questions and comments.
Thank you very much, Rajesh, for keeping us on time. And I don't see a question from the Q&A. Oh, there is one. Okay. There's a comment. Okay. So this is from Professor Chetri. Excellent presentation, Rajesh. Crop damage by wildlife is a serious issue in community forestry landscape. How can we manage the coexistence of wildlife and the community? What do you suggest?
Okay, so thank you, Chetri, for your presentations. So I think that is one of the major challenges this community forestry are facing in recent years. So based on my understanding, there are a couple of things we can do. The first one is to give the authority about the wildlife management to the local community. As I said in my presentations, most of the community, they don't have the legal authority to wildlife management in their community forestry, and most of them are still guided by the old department, the wildlife acts. So that could be the one possible solutions to address from the community perspective. And another one is so from our field work also, we've found that the community forestry which are not being done regular thinning or pruning process, or the community that are more close to the forest are more affected by the wild animals. So some of the protections or mitigation measures can be focused on those kind of community, and some regular sort of thinning and pruning can also reduce the issue of wildlife conflicts in the local area. And if this issue is more severe, the community can establish some sort of fund, or government can establish some sort of fund to compensate the damaged crops and wildlife damaged crops on livestock in the community areas.
Okay, so next question from Gangshan Kano. Okay. In the present scenario of climate change, the role of forestry is pivotal. Currently, we also witnessed the COP26 in Glasgow has committed to working collectively to halt and reverse forest loss and land degradation by 2030. And the community forestry in Nepal is crucial in this respect. Here, I understand that your study was focused on human-wildlife conflict. However, I wonder if you could shed light on the influences of community forestry in the dynamics of the social environmental systems. This is a big question.
Okay, so like I just want to add something on this one. So yeah, I totally agree what the Consam can also mention over here. But one of the things I want to make is, yes, we need to prioritize the conservations or forest restorations, at least to address the ongoing climate change issues and those sort of things. But one of the major things we have to consider is we cannot leave the peoples who are affected from this kind of conservation. For example, from our research sites also, the people who are able to migrate, they can migrate, or the rich people, they can find other alternative resources. But they are really poor people who don't have any sorts of livelihoods. So they are more impacted by those kind of conservation. So one of the major point I want to make is this kind of conservation should address all sort of peoples, including the poor and the people who cannot move from out there because of the conflicts or wildlife conflicts, those sort of things.
Okay, so another question from Professor Tiwari. Could you please, Rajesh ji, highlight key policy for conflict management?
So based on my review, so the existing policy, they just only cover the compensations for 14 different animals. But the issue we saw in community forestry are beyond caused by those 14 animals. So one thing the government can induce is they introduce the compensation mechanism made by different animals. For example, from our study also, the monkey is one of the major primary cause for the crop raiding in our state side. So if the government can introduce some kind of compensation from the damage made by the monkey, then it will address significant portions of the conflicts, especially the crop raidings. So that could be one of the policy measures that the local committee or government can introduce.
Okay, and so there are two more questions. One from Dr. Billsborough. Why is loss from crop raiding more from close to house than farther away? I would expect the latter, since less chance to scare animals away and protect crops.
Yeah, so yeah, that was a little bit surprising, but I think that's because of the land types. So in most of the case, the dry land is close to the house. That means they are more likely to cultivate the maize, and the maize is more likely to be attracting the monkeys. So that is one of the reasons we found. So the land parcels that are farther from the house are the paddy lands, and they only grow the rice. And the rice are less susceptible to the monkeys or porcupines compared to the maize and millet and wheat. So the closer land parcels are more susceptible from the crop raiding.
Great, thank you. So last question, how about, this is a question from Dr. Jad. So how about fence or barriers to reduce wildlife conflicts?
So yeah, that's kind of impossible because almost you said, what about the fence and barrier to wildlife conflict, right?
To reduce wildlife conflicts.
Yeah, so it's kind of impossible. Even in the restricted protected areas, there has been lots of issues with that one. So like almost all the forest and agriculture are so mosaic and intertwined with each other. So the forest and agriculture are like so small or kind of intertwined. So there is no possibility to form those kind of barriers or fencing to protect the crop raiding from the wild animals, at least in the context of Nepal.
Great, thank you.